Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, a little more than a week from now, you all will be going to the polls. You know, there are some other elections besides the presidency. We'll look at that and the presidential election in Pennsylvania after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, you can call this the pre-election free-for-all. We've gathered some of the state's top journalists. We're going to go through the presidential election, look at the row offices, see what other trouble we can get into for the next half hour. On my left here, your left, Brad Bumsted, Pittsburgh Tribune Review. Across the stage or the podium from me, John Micek, Allentown Morning Call. Tony Romeo, reporter with KDKA and KYW Radio. I got that all right. All right, let's go to the presidential election. The big question as we sit here today, not arguably Brad Bumsted, Barack Obama's ahead in the state. We can argue about how much, 10, 11, 12 percentage points. He's living in this state. And his surrogates, his vice president, his wife, they're still pouring money into the state. Campaign organization. What is that all about?
Well, they think they can take Pennsylvania. Now, there are some who would say no, even if that's not the case, for appearances, he can't give up in a major state like Pennsylvania. But I would say that it's close enough that McCain is still in it to compete. And he has an outside chance of winning, despite what the polls show.
Yeah. John, you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's precious few places now for McCain to go. He's withdrawn from Michigan. We learned recently that he's pulling up stakes in Iowa, New Mexico, and Colorado, 3 states that President Bush won narrowly in 2004. Between the 3 of them, they have 21 electoral votes.
Oddly enough, 21.
But the avenues to where McCain can go to put together the right kind of numbers to get to 264 are getting smaller all the time.
Tony, one of the things, you cover particularly Philadelphia a lot. The argument is that for Senator McCain to win Pennsylvania, he needs some help in, not a big turnout in Philadelphia, and he has to win the Philadelphia suburbs, Senator McCain, or he probably can't win the state. What's your sense about how the Southeast is going at the moment?
Well, the Southeast, like the rest of the state, has sort of been caught up in this tsunami of Democratic voter registrations. There's a clear edge, I think, in all the suburban counties now except Chester County that Democrats have a voter registration edge. So I think he faces the same challenges in the Philadelphia suburbs as he does in much of the rest of the state.
But one of the problems is that I've thought that if he leaves, isn't there if he just says, okay, I'm out, is your point, John, that he really has no other place to go? I mean, Brad, you were in a sense, is that it? There's no other place to go.
This is the Alamo. This is the Little Bighorn. Employ your last-stitch metaphor where you will. If he pulls out of Pennsylvania, which is now a practical impossibility because the math doesn't work, you've got, let's face it, you've got the smell of loser on the campaign, and the money. Maybe that's it.
John McCain has to win Pennsylvania, Florida, and Ohio to be able to pull this off. Those are the 3 battleground states that it's come down to. And, Ohio, I understand he's ahead by 2 points. So, Pennsylvania really becomes the key factor in this mix.
I think it's also a time to point out the volatility of the polls. Sure, you're looking at the polls in Pennsylvania and showing a substantive lead for Obama, 8 to 12 points, somewhere in that range. But really, both nationally and in Pennsylvania, there's been a great deal of volatility, and as you yourself have pointed out, there's been a great deal of volatility in terms of changing events, things that have happened, like the financial meltdown, that have changed the course of the campaign. I think in his mind, he has to think, as Brad pointed out, it'd be devastating if he pulled out. Why not roll the dice and keep plugging away in Pennsylvania, and maybe something will break his way? Yeah, John, is that obviously, to win this state, they need to get their core Republican votes out. And as Tony pointed out, the Democrats have made these voter registration gains. We want to talk a little bit later about what they mean, particularly because of a lawsuit that the Republicans in this state have filed. But 500,000 new registrations for Ds, 28,000 loss for the Rs, Republicans, since last year. But Sarah Palin has been really in some of these
areas, I mean, getting nice crowds, turning up core. They cannot win unless they do very, very well in certain regions of the state.
Right.
I mean,
you've seen her in the south. You've seen her in the Southwest. She's been in Beaver County. She's been in the Northeast, in Scranton, in Wilkes-Barre, up there where there are these more, conservative areas, possibly crossover to, some more conservative Reagan Democrats. I mean, that's her true responsibility. That's why you've seen her so much in the state, is to make sure the base, which can be iffy about McCain, admittedly, and still can be on the fence, remains excited, remains where they're supposed to be.
Okay, we have about a minute left, but I'm going to go through and get a quick answer. Outside chance, but still doable for McCain?
I'd even amend that to a little better than an outside chance. I think he has a shot.
Okay, John?
Uphill slog.
Tony?
A shot.
A shot, but you all agree. Do you think he's likely to stay here? I mean, is there no other? He doesn't have many other places to go, does he?
I don't think he'll spend as much time here, but I think he'll still be around.
So you think as we head into the final week, we might not see him, or? I'm
thinking make up the guest room.
Make up the guest room.
I think we'll see Sarah a good bit, and I think he's going to spend a lot of time in Florida, and continue to visit here occasionally, maybe not as much as we've seen.
All right, when we come back, the Attorney General's office, not arguably the hottest, the most, competitive, or we'll see. We'll be back, Attorney General's race, following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program, Attorney General's race. Well, gentlemen, as you know, the Attorney General, pretty important position in the state. It's also a jumping-off place to run for the governorship of the state. The Northampton DA Morganelli, the current Attorney General Corbett, locked in a tough, certainly a bitter contest. John, give us some of your thoughts about that race. Where do you see it?
Right now, there's about, depending on what poll you see, Muhlenberg College Morning Call poll has it about 7 points apart. But a massive proportion of voters, 28%, still have no idea who either of these two guys are. Not surprising in a race like this, where Mr. Corbett and Mr. Morganelli are sort of competing for oxygen with congressional races in the legislature, and certainly, of course, the presidency, everything coming in there, and they're trying to stake out territory for themselves. Looks like it's Mr. Corbett's right now, but a big Democratic wave out of the Southeast. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Tony, I think that's the compelling argument here. There isn't any doubt. Every week, every other day, the Attorney General is in some high-profile moment in the state that has been pretty widely covered. But the tidal wave, if it does occur, not suggesting it will, but if it does, take it from there.
Well, Mr. Morganelli has been trying desperately to get traction on the issue of his allegations that Corbett has mishandled the investigation of what's known as Bonusgate in the legislature. He insists again and again that Corbett blew an opportunity to seize records from all four caucuses, having seized records from only the Democrats right away. And, of course, Corbett's response to that is that Morganelli doesn't know for sure what went on in the investigation. But the upshot is he's trying to get traction on that issue, hasn't had a great deal of success, and with polls showing that a lot of voters are undecided or don't know these candidates, it would seem the formula for a Morganelli win would be the coattails of the top of the Democratic ticket, if there are coattails.
Yeah, and one of the advantages that typically candidates, the Attorney General Corbett is from Western PA. You tend to get a little sort of friends and neighbors effect going on there. That I think would help him. And Morganelli's available money is not as large, so getting through the commercial. It's president, president, president. Where else does that go?
Well, and the other thing is that if there isn't this tidal wave for Obama, some Republicans believe that McCain will keep Corbett in the race because McCain is at least providing a cushion. He's not getting swamped like Lynn Swan when he was at the top of the ticket, so they might have a chance. I also believe that Corbett's gotten enough publicity out of all of this that if people go in and vote for Barack Obama, Corbett could be the breaking off point where you split your ticket. and Pennsylvanians are notorious for doing that.
That's a good point. Go ahead.
Oh, just going to point out, though, the only thing that maybe is a little different is all the new voters that you have this year, according to what voter registration statistics are showing us. And Governor Rendell this past week had a news conference where he was acting as a surrogate for Obama, and he was expressing the concern that the Democrats have with so many new voters who are enthusiastic about Obama that they might just go in there and vote for president and that's it. And they want, of course, those people to vote the straight Democratic ticket.
I mean, they have these.
But if that were to happen, if they were to vote straight Democrat, you could be a boost from voting.
Yeah, I mean, they have these so-called generic ballots where they look at it, and it seems like the young voters are breaking broadly for Democrats, for Obama and for Democrats in general. But Pennsylvanians being Pennsylvanians, I mean, Mr. Corbett is, even if that does happen, Mr. Corbett's established himself as kind of enough as a name brand, at least among people who pay attention to this sort of thing, that he's become identified with bonus kid. I think Brad's right. That might actually be the point where they go down, they click off the Democratic numbers, but they get to Corbett and they say, well, wait a minute, he's the guy who's trying to do, and then they go there. So
in summary, you would say that Corbett is a favorite going into this. If he loses, it's likely because of the tidal wave. I'm not saying there will be, but do all of you believe that's probably the only way he could lose this election?
It is the only way.
The only way. You agree with that?
Yes.
Absolutely.
A consensus. All right, let's turn to get as much of this in this segment as we can. The Republicans, as a party, have filed a suit in Commonwealth Court alleging voter registration fraud. I'm saying not voter fraud, registration fraud in all of these, in some of these registrations that have been carried out in this state by ACORN and by others. Tony, give me an update on that. Where does all that stand?
Well, again, a suit has been filed in Commonwealth Court, and the Republican Party is seeking action against ACORN, and also a court order to compel the Department of State to take what they say would be necessary actions to ensure a fair election. Although the Republicans, Robert Gleason, the chairman of the party, Sandra Newman, the former Supreme Court Justice, state Supreme Court Justice, are, saying repeatedly they don't think, or at least Ms. Newman has been saying she doesn't think it's now possible to get a fair election.
Is this something, Brad, that's, Commonwealth Court, as we talk now, 9 days or 10 days before the election, is this going to be, doesn't seem like something that's going to get resolved before this election, does it?
It really doesn't, but I think it's all part of, in one way, it's part of two things at the national scene. One is, McCain and the ticket have been coming down on ACORN as a focal point to show that Obama was tied to them and they're involved in fraudulent activities.
Do you think that's sort of a part of that whole?
I think it is, but on the other hand, it's also part of a national investigation.
Right.
The FBI is involved in it, and I think this story is going to have legs after the election because I think you could see numerous indictments beyond the occasional volunteer who's been charged. There's all kinds of problems in ACORN's headquarters office in New Orleans with one of the partners fighting with the other, and documents have been taken out. The New York Times reported on it this week.
Not to impugn.
I think we can all agree here, though, that alleged voter registration fraud is miles away from actual electoral fraud.
Right. So
I want to make 2 points here, and all of what Brad and Tony have said is valid, but there are external factors at work here. If you look at what the motivations for these lawsuits are, it's twofold. One, it's to depress turnout among these new registrants, to create enough questions that some of them may stay away from the polls because they think that the validity of their registrations could be challenged. One. Two, I think it's to cause ACORN to expend money they would be using on court fees and lawyers that they otherwise use on get out the vote operations on election day.
We'll hold this. We're going to come back. We'll continue this discussion. This is an important discussion. This could lead to a contested election in this state that could drag on for some time. Back in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Welcome back. A little more than a week to the general election in our state. We're talking about presidential election. We're now into this lawsuit filed by the Republican Party against, I guess, the Department of State, in effect, state government, for what they allege is failures to do certain things with regard to the propriety of registration, voter registrations in this state. Brad, you wanted to make a comment.
I did. I thought the point that John brought up about the difference between voter registration fraud and voter fraud is valid, in its face, but I think it's a bigger problem than that, and I think it minimizes the problems that can surface with voter registration that we don't know about. Mm-hmm. These are the people you caught. Here's the fraud. We don't know what else is in that system, number one. Mm-hmm. And number two, I strongly believe you could wind up having people disenfranchised who show up to vote and their address has been changed because somebody from ACORN, put them in another precinct with something they filed, and they'll only be able to vote by provisional ballot and may not have their vote counted.
Go ahead, John. Tony, go ahead. We'll go to you, John, in a minute.
No, I was just saying that they're probably, it's hard not to look at this and think that they aren't setting the stage for the possibility of a close election. That seems to be the best shot that John McCain has right now, is to get the election close. That doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't legitimate concerns there about voter fraud. And again, there is a difference between voter registration fraud and fraud, but I agree with Brad that it remains to be seen how it plays out at the polls. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the problems historically, I think, has been forget ACORN for a minute, forget Democrats and Republicans, is the exact nature of these voter registration rolls, which, as you know, have been the subject. Every one of you, I'm sure, has done a story on voter registration. Who's in, who's out? Are the records purged enough? John, do you think that we've done enough in general, forget ACORN, just to guarantee that everyone who signed up is properly signed up, and everybody who shouldn't be on the rolls is off the rolls?
Probably not. There's supposed to be all of these electoral reforms enacted. After '06, that Governor Rendell was really hot for. My paper reported that a lot of that work still remains drastically undone. I should stress that I'm not unconcerned about the possibility of some kind of electoral fraud. I just wonder how much of this is being blown up.
You think it's a political act?
I think is there a possibility for something to go awry? Yes, there's a possibility for something to go awry in every electoral cycle. But I think, as Tony said, that it's being trumped.
Right.
To create, to set the stage for an appeal later on. Because if you look at what the Republicans are claiming, at least in the portion of the suit that concerns the Department of State, they're asking the Department of State to do things the Department of State already does anyway.
But do they do them efficiently? Your silence around his table.
Well, no. I think part of it is the sure computer system that they have. That there hasn't been adequate access to that provided to county officials. Mm-hmm. I don't know whether that's true or not.
Yeah. But there's still some.
I just wanted to comment on one thing that John said, and that is that I want to be clear that what I was saying is just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. Yeah. Just because the GOP is taking the lead and making this an issue, they're probably thinking that they're hoping for a close election, but that doesn't mean that there aren't legitimate concerns there.
2 other row offices. We're going to find out if you know anything about these elections coming up.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. John Micek, let's go. Auditor General Jack Wagner, incumbent. Chet Voller from Lancaster County, Does anybody know much about this race?
If you think if the Attorney General's race is flying under the radar,
yeah.
These guys are like in the Marianas Trench with the nuclear submarines. I mean, there's literally nobody outside of like their parents who are paying attention to these races.
But Jack Wagner, the incumbent, riding the Democratic wave, maybe?
Pretensions towards governor in 2010, yes.
All right, stay on this. Treasurer's office, open seat. Rob McCord, the Democrat, the financial guy. Tom Ellis, same, even lower profile.
Tom Ellis, the former Montgomery County Commissioner.
Yes.
A very low-profile race. Mr. McCord has a ton of money. There seems to be polling data that shows the race is breaking his way. Yeah. It's just one of those things.
All right. Short trip to that. Maybe we'll revisit that next week. All right. I want to tell control of the State House. Very important here. Governor Rendell, last 2 years of his office, 1 vote Democratic edge. Tony Romeo. What's going to happen? Will the D's pick up seats because of what might happen in the Philly burbs? What's your assessment?
There's a lot of factors here. I think, once again, the issue of the Democratic voter registration edge, new voters. Does the top of the ticket have coattails? That could affect the outcome. Yeah. You have the bonus gate scandal playing out at the moment. As Mr. Morganelli, the AG candidate, Democratic AG candidate, keeps pointing out, we only have Democrats in the House who've been charged. People, one sitting member, 1 former member, and others are current and former staffers.
Brad, let me turn to you. Bonus gate. It doesn't seem. I mean, out in the precincts, as they say. Is anybody really paying much attention to it at that
It depends where you are.
Good point.
If you're in the epicenter of Bonus Gate, which is in Beaver County, it's huge. And Mike Vion's old district there, Vion, of course, was charged with felonies and is to stand trial in January. In the Jim Marshall, Dennis Rousseau race, Vion is a huge factor in that whole race. Some of the surrounding districts in Beaver County are also affected. And then in probably what is the most high-profile race in Greene County, where Majority Leader Bill DeWeese is running for re-election against a former arena football player, Greg Hopkins. That's pretty much all Hopkins talks about is, DeWeese was involved in all of this, and DeWeese says he wasn't.
Okay, we're out of time. Control, stay with the D's.
I think so, yes.
I think so.
Don't know.
Not sure.
I'm not sure.
Two to neutral. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well.